Welcome to DC Direct. I'm Lionel Donovan. Here in this show, we try to talk about some of the bigger stories, but we want you to weigh in. So follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at TRT World, and use the hashtag DC Direct to be a part of the conversation. In today's show, we're talking about gentrification.
Gentrification at its finest, you hear me? The worst thing that happened in the city, you hear me? The worst.
Dionne Reeder is all too familiar with gentrification. As a former restaurant owner, Dion was shocked when the owners of the building raised the rent by several $100s. Unable to afford the increase, Dion had no choice but to pack up. Can you tell me, after the way that you lost your business, can you tell me what was going through your mind when that happened?
Frustration, pain, hurt, disappointment, embarrassment. How did it happen to me? What could we have done differently to keep it? And then the reality set in that the big G word happened and that I didn't own my building. And I realized that like most of what was happening in the District of Columbia, it just happened to me.
Do you think, what happened to you, have you seen that play out in other parts of the city? Like have you seen it in other places in DC?
Yeah, I grew up here. This is, I'm actually, on my mom's side, I'm a third generation Washingtonian. On my dad, I'm a fourth generation. Okay. So my parents, they raised us not far from where we are, and I was fortunate enough to keep my family's house. So my sister and I live in our family's house, and, for me, the benefit is that I saw the city change, but I was fortunate enough to be able to withstand the change. And a lot of people can't say that. On our block, we're probably one of the 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 families that actually still live there from growing up as a child.
Unfortunately, Dionne's story is not unique here in Washington, D.C. The capital has experienced the most intense gentrification process in the country, and it doesn't look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. But how does this phenomenon occur, and what exactly does this process look like? Let's talk to community organizer Daniel Del Pielago and realtor Tracey Barnett to get an idea of what gentrification is.
A lot of people sometimes think of gentrification as this process where the artists show up into a neighborhood and then the hip coffee shops show up into the neighborhood, but it's not really like that. It is a deliberate process by developers to extract money out of the neighborhoods, facilitated by the government. People should realize how it really works and that it's not just this kind of process that just happens, right? Because these new businesses or this new, artsy folks move into the city. It doesn't happen like that. It is deliberate.
Having seen the change in Washington, D.C., my perspective and opinion is that it's looking at what once was is being replaced by what I call a new norm. And that new norm in the neighborhoods and areas of Washington, D.C. being impacted by a level of affluence or wealth that didn't exist before.
The effects of gentrification have been felt strongly in D.C. The city's black population once stood at over 70%, earning it the nickname Chocolate City. But just 45 years later, that number dropped to 48.3%. In 2000, around half the neighborhoods in D.C. were set to be gentrified. Just 13 years later, around 41% of those neighborhoods went through the process, displacing around 20,000 black residents. This has led some to worry that these neighborhoods aren't just losing people. Community activist Maurice is very worried about what can be lost through gentrification.
People will have to come to museums and special events to see the past historical black community within urban space. Because at some point, only folks who have the money will be able to be in these spaces. And that's going to eliminate a very strong history of black culture in many cities across the country.
It's almost, to a degree, a feeling of genocide in a sense. because that existing culture, it was the foundation, the ground, the roots of what made that neighborhood, that community what it was. I think it's more about understanding between the people that were here and the new people that are coming in, and both sides having empathy and understanding. And I think if that exists, things would be much better, in my opinion.
Maurice is also seeing this same story being played out in cities across the U.S.
I think it's happening all over the country. I know that it's happening in Atlanta, in New Orleans, in Oakland, in many spaces that were systemically devalued for generations, where we were locked into an urban space. And for generations, we were able to survive within those spaces, given all the challenges, structural challenges that we had with crime and low outcome education and all types of challenges that we had in those communities, but those communities were ours.
This is my best friend brother. I told you he lived on W Street.
Oh, what's going on, man?
W Street, yes.
Oh, okay.
Dion feels that gentrification is an inevitable byproduct of urban development, but she hopes that in the future, city planners will proceed with all the community's residents in mind.
I just think that when you're thinking about gentrification, it's something that, you know, we can do it more responsibly. I don't think it's nothing we're going to be able to ever stop. I think people are people. People who are financially stable are going to be able to have more. And I think it's how we treat others with what we have. And I believe that we have to make sure that as a city, the government has a responsibility to ensure people aren't pushed out as we develop. We can do a better job in ensuring that people have ownership because we have the resources to do so. And if we're bartering deals and making sure that we give new development, you know, tax credits, let's give them credits so that people who want to stay in the community can stay there. So that's it.
Well, that's all the time we have for DC Direct, but please be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at TRT World. And use the hashtag DC Directs to let us know what you think about the gentrification of urban communities in the U.S. Until next time, I'm Lionel Donovan.